Hello, everyone, and welcome to the debut episode of the Hammer Territory Podcast, a podcast about the Atlanta Braves. I am your host, Brad Rowland, and I'm joined by Scott Coleman. Scott, how are you as we transition into the month of May and roll out a brand new podcast?
Brad, I am doing great. It is really good to hear your voice. It has been a little bit of time since you and I both got together for a podcast. Of course, we are here under a new name, a new network, a lot of exciting things, and very happy to be back on the airwaves.
Yes, so as Scott references, and as I do as well, we are a podcast that existed before, but we are back in a new form. We recorded hundreds of episodes as both the Talking Chop and Battery Power podcasts. We are very glad that you found us. I'm sure some of you are returning from that feed, and we definitely appreciate that. We would love it if you would subscribe to this new show on your favorite podcast platform, and of course, tell your friends and family about the program so we can help to spread the word and grow the podcast. We are also part of the Foul Territory Network, which might sound familiar to you. It is a great network of shows that involves Ken Rosenthal and Scott Braun, a ton of different baseball players, retired names that you will certainly recognize. And we are now under that umbrella as Hammer Territory. And essentially what we do, or what we endeavor to do, is to cover the Braves in comprehensive fashion. We have fun. We talk about the ins and outs. We give you the nuances, the numbers, the trends, all of that fun stuff. It is not just Scott and I as well. We are joined by two more co-hosts on a regular basis, Stephen Tolbert and Shawn Coleman. You will have a rotation of the four of us, and lots and lots of content coming your way in the near future. Scott, I know I'm fired up about this. I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah, thrilled to be back. Very excited to be part of the Foul Territory Network. If listeners or longtime listeners of the Talking Chop and Battery Power podcast and have not checked out the Foul Territory network of shows, please be sure to do that. A ton of great baseball content. And as you just said, Brad, if you're a longtime listener, you know what we do here. We love the Atlanta Braves. We cover the ins and outs and day-to-day of the team. We'll crank in a couple of emergency podcasts whenever news calls for it. We'll be here for all the highs and the lows and the heartbreak and the euphoria. And again, just great to be back. And we want to thank everybody who has made the transition over from Battery Power to Hammer Territory. We're very excited about this, and it should be a great ride.
Yes, and eventually we'll stop talking about the old feed and all of the old stuff, but we do want to make sure people get comfortable with us, and hopefully you will enjoy what you are about to hear. But from this point forward on this episode, we'll be talking about actual Atlanta Braves baseball. And to reset things, as we're recording this podcast, in between series, the Braves just finished up a series against Seattle on the road, and then now they're heading to Los Angeles for the first showdown against the Dodgers over the weekend. Of course, Atlanta is 20-9. I'm sure we will probably poke fun or maybe think about or laugh about a little bit of a freak out in the last couple of days, but the Braves did win their most recent game on Wednesday in Seattle, and they have the best record in baseball, although a familiar foe, NL East rival, the Philadelphia Phillies, are currently hot on their heels in second place across baseball. We'll cover it, of course, in more depth in a second, but it's kind of been synergistic. The offense started out hot for the Braves this year. The pitching was a little bit wobbly out of the gate. Of course, Spencer Strider getting injured was an unfortunate subplot earlier this season. Lately, it's been the pitching actually carrying a massive load, and the offense has been a little bit wobbling. But Scott, honestly, that sounds like a good baseball team to me. One that can kind of cover it for itself when one part of it's struggling, have the other parts of it step up.
Yeah, it's crazy to think the Braves are 20-9. And I am not sure at any point in the first month of the year did they have both the pitching and the lineup firing together at the same time. You just said early on the lineup was unbelievable, but there was some shakiness in the rotation. And then the pitching staff over the last couple of weeks especially has been phenomenal. Max Fried has really settled in after a weird start to the year. Chris Sale has been fantastic. Let's all hope and pray that he stays healthy for the year because Chris Sale looks like vintage Chris Sale right now. Old Chuck Morton at age 40 is going strong. Ronaldo Lopez has been an incredible find, one that was pretty unheralded in the offseason, and Lopez has been terrific. And the bullpen, while maybe not perfect, has been plenty fine as well. So hopefully after this win on Wednesday afternoon to avoid the sweep in Seattle, let's hope the bats get going. It is pretty wild to see the big trio of Acuna, Olsen, and Riley struggling the way they have. But at the end of the day, the Braves are on pace for about 112 wins. And while it has not been perfect and there are things to improve upon, this is pretty good standing here a month into the year.
When you are winning 2 out of every 3 games in baseball, you are doing something right. That's a very shorthand version. It's very broad on purpose, but certainly nothing is disastrous so far for Atlanta. So rather than, especially for recurring listeners, rather than go back 3.5, 4 weeks since we last podcasted, we're not going to do that necessarily. That was kind of our brief overview at the top here, but we'll kind of dive into the Seattle series for the most part on this show. And at the end of the show, we will also preview the massive showdown coming up this weekend between the two. I don't know if they were preseason favorites, but two of the top three favorites probably for the World Series coming into the season and probably still right now, Braves Dodgers in Los Angeles. But first, let's dive into the 3-game series in Seattle. And I would say the theme, even with the Braves winning on Wednesday afternoon, was that the offense was kind of in a power outage. I wrote about it a little bit actually on Wednesday morning before they broke out of it a little bit on Wednesday. But even on Wednesday, they only had one real good inning. And it kind of, I don't know, produces frustration when things go that way. Lower scoring games when your offense is not functioning at its peak level, those games can lead to swings. You have one bad pitch here, one bad pitch there, and things can flip. And I think that Monday's 2-1 loss in Seattle was perhaps the epitome of that, because for the most part, it was a late night game. A lot went well for 2+ hours, and then in about 2 minutes or so or less between two batters, it all went south.
Yeah, it's crazy. I thought we might be getting the Braves' first no-hitter for the first time in 30 years. Shout out to Kent Merker in 1994. Still has the last no-hitter for the Braves. A difficult 2-1 loss, but again, AJ Minter came in, seemed like the Braves were on their way, and just made a couple of mistake pitches, and one that Seattle did not miss and went very far for a walk-off home run. But overall, I mean, really all 3 games in the series were toss-ups or close to it. That's the way it goes sometimes. The Braves were uncharacteristically have been pretty bad offensively for the last week or so. And Cleveland and Seattle are 2 teams that really can pitch, especially at home for the Mariners. That's a really good rotation, probably the best rotation in the American League when it's all said and done. And, a tough one to open up the series on Monday. The Braves also had just traveled all the way across the country. They had played Sunday afternoon in Atlanta and then flew cross country to play the Mariners that Monday evening, which is never easy. So unfortunate to be sure, but the Mariners are a good team. They're probably the favorites in the American League West, especially the way the Astros have struggled. So while, of course, you never want to lose a series, there's no shame in losing a couple of games to the Mariners.
Yeah, that's right. Seattle's a quality team, the pitching staff in particular. New listeners may not know this, but Scott is actually based in Arizona, and currently Arizona is on Pacific time. They don't change their clocks in Arizona. One of those weird things out there where you live, Scott. But
We're very weird out here.
I say that because we always kind of refer to these West Coast trips as peak Scott Coleman time, because Scott is the one that's in his prime time. It's not super late when these games are happening. And I'm sure you were on recap duty, writing wise, on Monday evening. And so you had a close personal look and all kinds of notes and things about a game that was, again, it was 1-0 in the 9th inning. And then essentially, Minter takes the ball because Iglesias was unavailable. He pitched 2 previous games, a leadoff single, and then quite literally just a terrible pitch to Mitch Garver that Minter owned up to. Everybody talked about it. Just, you can't miss like that. And within seconds, it was just over. And it was one of those can't predict ball games. But I'm glad you pointed out how good Seattle's rotation is, because their pitching staff in general is top notch. Doesn't give the Rays an excuse, but it is kind of an explanation for part of what happened. And basically, it just leaves you with very little margin for error. Even when you're winning, you're up 1 run and things can flip on you that fast.
Yeah. And if you're looking for a positive, Max Fried was phenomenal.
Yeah.
6 innings of a no-hitter. It was starting, everyone was starting to look around at each other like, are the Braves really about to do this? Are we about to see a combined no-hitter? They made it through 7 innings. Pierce Johnson was really good as well in relief. Unfortunately, things went a little sideways in the 8th. The no-hitter went away. And then now AJ Minter is a very, very good reliever, and he was thrust into 9th inning duty because Iglesias was not available. But man, I think if you really, the big picture takeaway, I believe the game was played on April 29th, which is hardly the highest of stakes the Braves are going to play this year. For April 29th, I think the big takeaway is that Max Fried looks fantastic. 15 straight scoreless innings, a 1.37 ERA over his last 4 starts after the very, very weird start to the season where he couldn't even get through the first inning. It's good to have Max back, especially without Spencer Strider at the top of the rotation. Right now, Fried and Sale make for about as good of a 1-2 punch as there is in the National League.
I was gonna say, do you remember when Max Fried was absolutely terrible? Because he was for a minute, and
Yeah.
I know that it was happening when we were kind of on podcast hiatus, but on Twitter and other things, we were able to share like, hey, I'm not worried about Max. There's no reason to really panic about a guy with a record as long as his, as long as he wasn't hurt, and knock on wood, he's not. He looks like himself again. Just to get this out of the way, there was absolutely no chance he was going to be able to finish the no hitter off. I every time a guy gets pulled a no hitter, there's somebody in the crowd that gets mad about it. But he was already at 100 pitches through 6 innings, and in the modern game, you can grumble about this if you want to, but there was just no chance he was going to throw 3 more innings, like 0%. Especially as you said in late April, they're not pushing that. The combine no hitter would have been fun, and that's also the same way it was with Merker back in the day. But just to get out in front of it, there was just no way it was going to happen for Max on his own on that night, even though he was awesome.
Yeah, I don't want Max Fried throwing 130 pitches
No
on
thanks.
yeah, sadly, that's not going to happen. And a theme I think that also emerged is just the offense was pretty non-existent. You alluded to a couple of minutes ago there was a good inning on Wednesday afternoon where the Braves scored 4 runs. But other than that, man, it was tough. I mean, it's just been tough to watch. The whole lineup is kind of slumping right now. I guess Ozzy Albies has been good since he came back from his toe injury, and Marcelo Zuna has been fine. But overall, like 1 through 9, there are far more players who are struggling and in a bit of a slump than there are who are playing well. And that's just uncommon for this Braves lineup the last couple of years. It felt like even if a few guys were down, there were a few others who were red hot and picking up the slack. And it's just been an odd couple of weeks offensively. I don't think anyone is necessarily panicked or sounding the alarm because there's just too much talent in this Braves lineup. But it is weird to watch Ron Acuna Jr. just swing right through fastballs right down the middle of the plate. Matt Olson just hasn't found the same power that he had last year. Same for Austin Riley. Somebody pointed out that Riley has to lead the world in baseballs that have just died at the warning track. I would put him up against probably anybody because he's just been off ever so slightly. But at the end of the day, these are just really good players. They're going to figure it out. And hopefully it happens this weekend when the Braves head to LA and face a rival in Los Angeles.
It's a good point. And, even this year, there were times when guys were scuffling, to your point about how it's rare for the whole lineup to kind of be down at the same time. And Ozzy has been pretty good. But, early in the year, Marcelo Zuna was on an absolute tear. There was that 3-day period where Travis Arnaud was the best player in the world. That kind of that kind of stuff happened. Orlando Arcia was really hot early in the year. Michael Harris was really hot for about a week, maybe 2 weeks. And right now, nobody's really doing that. And I think that someone will, again, maybe today unlock things that we'll get into in a second with kind of the big three being most of the offense on Wednesday after they had been the guys who have been struggling. I do think, broadly speaking, it's a little bit different of a reaction if the guys who are struggling were not Ronald Acuna, Matt Olson, and Austin Riley, who are, I don't know, Scott, three of the top 15 players in the world conservatively right now. Ronnie,
Yeah.
arguably the best player in the world. Riley's been a perennial top 10 MVP guy the last 3 years. Olson was top 4 in the NL last year and would have had an MVP worthy season a lot of times. Like, I have trouble worrying about those guys. I really do.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time. And they've had some bad luck too. The Braves lead baseball by a considerable margin in barreled outs. So baseballs that they have barreled at the plate have just found a glove. It's the way it goes sometimes. I would like to think over the course of 162 games, it's all going to balance out and the pendulum will swing in their favor and get back on track to this lineup we knew a year ago. And even with this downturn, overall, the numbers are still good. Maybe not
Yeah.
historic. Yeah, maybe not historic as they were last season, but on the whole, the team looks fine offensively. It's just when you start out so well and then most everybody has cooled down considerably, it's just going to feel a little bit different. The Braves have also run into some good pitching in recent weeks. It's not as if they're not putting up runs against the Oakland A's and the Chicago White Sox. That would probably have me a little more concerned, but I mean, the Cleveland Guardians are a pitching factory. The Mariners, as we said, might have a top 3 rotation in baseball. Hopefully, they just settle in. The weather is going to warm up. That's only going to help. Hopefully, they get back to hitting home runs. They haven't hit many home runs either. And just kind of get back to being the Braves that we enjoyed so much last season.
For sure. And Monday's game, they scratched a run across with the help of an infield single and two stolen bases from Ronald Acuna. They had 3 hits in the entire game. Tuesday, they lose by a run again, 3-2. They had 7 hits on Tuesday, but all were singles, nothing extra bases. They're down 3-0 in the eighth inning. They get back into it as this team always seems to. They're really, over multiple years now, extremely resilient and getting back into games, never being out of games. Earlier this year, they were doing that, the comeback thing that they seem to do with regularity. But there was this 10-game sample, which I cut off before Wednesday's game because they did score 5 runs today. It was a little bit better. But the 10 games previously to that, we're talking all around how shaky they've been. But they had a 635 OPS as a team over 10 games. They scored 36 runs in 10 games. That's not a disaster for most teams. Like, it's pretty bad for over 10 games for most teams, but like for this offense to do that, and yeah, they're not 100% healthy, but they're close to it. That is a pretty big surprise, even over that small of a sample size. We've kind of talked about this too. They've been very unlucky. You mentioned the barreled outs. Our colleague and co-host Stephen Tolbert wrote about this at batterypower.com actually, about kind of how they've been unlucky across the board in the last couple of weeks. But the Braves still, as of today, when we're recording this podcast between series, lead all of Major League Baseball in hard hit rate and exit velocity for the season. Those are 2 really good stats to lead the majors in. Like, I think
right.
that probably indicates that it's going to be a better time ahead.
Yes, it should, right? You would hope that it balances out. They have been hitting the baseball on the ground a fair amount, which is a little bit of a concern. Of course, you hit the baseball on the ground. What is the absolute best outcome? I mean, maybe a triple if it just happens to roll to the perfect place, but more than likely it's either going to be a ground out or it's going to be a single. With the power that's in this lineup, we want the Braves to drive the ball, get it up in the air. And again, I don't think anyone is really concerned. It's just, man, it's a really good lineup, and it feels like it's only a matter of time before Acuna and Riley and Olsen get going. Michael Harris has been okay, but I still think he has another gear in his game. It sounds like Sean Murphy is getting closer to a rehab stint, which will be really good. For as good as Travis d'Arnaud has been in limited duty, it'll be great to have Murph out there as well. And just 1 through 9, right? Like we've seen Orlando Arcia can get hot and be a contributor. I don't know if you necessarily want Orlando to be one of your key guys, especially if others are struggling. But man, when the Braves lineup is humming and the top is going, and then even if the bottom half is just okay, it just feels like to me that we're just kind of counting down the days until everything gets going again. And assuming the pitching staff keeps it going the way they have, that's a scary thought, especially for a team that is 20-9. You think about the ceiling and just how good it can be if everything gets clicking together. It could be a really fun month ahead.
It should be, for sure. And just one more note on that Tuesday game. Ronaldo Lopez, who you talked about earlier in accurate terms, he is a human after all. He had been, I would say, unhuman in his first 4 starts. He allowed 3 runs and a home run. He actually, even in a quote-unquote not that great start, he struck out 7 with 2 walks. He's not even allowed multiple runs in a start until then. He has a 1.5 ERA. And look, he was always going to be due for some regression. No one was going to be able to keep up what he was doing this first 4 starts. But even in a less spectacular outing on Tuesday, Ronaldo's been a huge story. We don't have to go super deep into it now, but the fact that they're getting what they're getting out of him has really, really helped, given the Strider absence that happened essentially right away, the early starters from Fried, et cetera. Like, there's been a lot of guys. We talked about Sale. Morton's been very, sort of rock solid. Elder's done a good job since he came up, but Lopez being this in a uncertain role for him. When we talked over the winter, we were not sure he was even going to be given the opportunity to start. They talked about it. We knew that. The fact that he was basically just always going to be a starter according to everybody with the team in the spring, him to pitch this well in his first 5 starts, and look, it's 5 starts, but all of what I've seen, I don't know about you, looks like a guy who is a legitimate starter.
He's been a godsend. And for a pitcher who I think we all just kind of penciled him in for the bullpen, and then the front office was saying, no, he's going to get a chance. And then, of course, he did get a chance in the spring and looked good. And especially without Spencer Strider, you talk about needing players to step up. Ronaldo has been huge. And it feels like, to me anyway, that it's still very early in the year. The calendar is flipped to May, but it feels like they're just kind of not biding their time, but just trying to connect the dots and go day by day. And then, of course, once the summer rolls around, there might be an opportunity to add another starter to this rotation. But it cannot be overstated what Ronaldo Lopez has done to stabilize the rotation, especially as the carousel in the 5th starter spot has been okay. Alan Winans got beat up. Darius Vines was okay. Bryce Elder has been okay. But you talk about just having that reliable fourth starter behind Freed and Sale and Morton. Ronaldo's been terrific. I think the Braves have really handled him well, skipping days and giving him an extra day of rest wherever they can. That's only going to pay dividend in the summer months as his innings continue to rise. And just a tip of the cap to the front office for identifying Lopez because he has been a great ad so far.
Absolutely. And hopefully that will continue. We should at least touch on the one positive game briefly. We referenced it, but just to kind of dig into it a little bit, a 5-2 victory on Wednesday on getaway day. I think everyone would feel better based on the result of winning the getaway than it would have been if it had been a sweep. In the first two games, we kind of poked fun already about how some of the freak out is unwarranted, but anytime you don't want to get swept. No one ever wants to get swept. It's rarely happened to this team the last few years, but the Braves going out and taking an early lead, never giving it up, and just kind of being in control. Again, they really only had one positive offensive inning in the entire series, but it was timed well. And it was actually ironic, given what we talked about earlier, a lot about Ronnie and Olson and Riley. The bottom four of the batting order on Wednesday went 0 for 16 with no walks. It was an absolute wasteland at the bottom of the order. For once this year, the top of the order did its job.
Well, and the really encouraging sign for me was that there were a lot of hard hit baseballs. We talked about some of the bad luck these guys have run into, but Ronald had a ball that was about 112 off the bat. He smoked a line drive up the middle, which is, I think, when he's really going, he's hitting the ball to the middle of the field, right? His timing is right. I think he's probably still just trying to battle through a spring where he just didn't get a lot of plate appearances during spring training because of the knee issue. Riley and Olson as well had some well hit balls. I think it's just, I don't want to be repetitive, but it feels like it's just a matter of time before this trio of superstars starts to break through. And it was definitely good to get a win on Wednesday. Monday and Tuesday were actually the first time all season long the Braves had lost back-to-back games.
Yep.
Which is pretty crazy when you consider that we are a month into the season. So to get a win on Wednesday, there's a day off on Thursday, and then, of course, a very big series on the horizon against the Dodgers, at least as big as the series can be the first week of May. Nobody wants to get swept, especially against a good West Coast team, which was maybe not a marking stick game, but one where you want to see how you stack up against one of the better teams in the American League so far. So a nice win. There was that one inning where the top of the lineup really did all the damage, and that was all they needed because Chris Sale, oh boy, Brad, Chris Sale has been nasty every single time he's gone out there, and it feels like he is getting better and stronger every time he takes the mound.
I totally agree. I know you were calling your shot on that in the spring, but he only navigated 5 innings today because his pitch count got a little bit higher than you would like it to, but 9 strikeouts, no walks, 1 run allowed. My favorite stat of Chris Sale on Wednesday was the fact that he generated 21 whiffs in the game. You cannot fake that. That
No,
means your stuff is disgusting,
he
basically.
is, dude, he is nasty. I had not seen a ton of Chris Sale over the past couple of years with the Red Sox. I catch him on a national telecast every now and then, but it is not hard to see when you watch Chris Sale right now. He at one point had a very real claim to be the best pitcher on planet Earth. It takes about 2 seconds of watching him to see just how good this guy is. And maybe he isn't quite that level in the back nine of his career now. He's 35 years old. But man, let's just hope that his health cooperates and holds up because Chris Sale has been downright unhittable. You talk about 21 whiffs. That is the epitome of unhittable. Very, very good on Wednesday and really stepped up when the Braves needed him to step up.
Yeah, I mean he really is nasty, and one of our we're often wrong, and maybe we will be again. I'm sure we will be again. In fact, but something we said a lot. I know you led with it quite a bit in the spring was essentially that Chris Sale has never been bad when he's healthy ever. He's always been good. It's either he's good or he's hurt. That's the Chris Sale experience, and here we are again. Knock on wood again. We're all holding our breath for Chris Sale. He's an older guy, tons of injury issues, but so far so good. He looks incredible, and it's one of the we focus a lot on the weaknesses of the offense in recent days, but the starting pitching has been incredible in particular. The bullpen's kind of been the same all year. It's been top 10 in the league, mostly rock solid. Bullpens always give up some stuff every once in a while. People remember the worst stuff more than the better stuff, but it's been totally fine. The starting pitching, after a rough first week or so, maybe 2 weeks max, has been incredible. They're number 2 in the league now in starting pitcher ERA. their ERA as a unit has been around 2 for like 3 weeks now. Basically, as soon as they have one bad start in about the last 3.5 weeks, and it was from Darius Vines, who's not pitching in the rotation right now. Like everybody's been good almost every time out, and that won't sustain because bad starts will just happen. But it's been every single game the starters leaving the game having allowed 1 or 2 runs. It feels like every night.
Yeah, and a quick note on Chris Sale, of course, who was acquired in the offseason for Vaughn Grissom. Grissom is finally healthy, and he's going to make his debut with the Red Sox. So if you happen to catch a Red Sox game, he is going to be out there. Wish the best for Vaughn. Seems like a good kid, a kid who really cared, a kid who was genuinely sad to be moving on from the Braves. So we will be rooting for him these next few months as he's going to get a chance to play basically every day in Boston. Which
he was gonna debut and they got sick too. Did you see that?
Yeah,
Like he was
yeah.
like ready to go and they were ready to play him and it was like, oh, by the way, he's ill. Like, oh man, come on,
Tough
bro.
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had an injury in the spring, which set him back. So we'll be rooting for Vaughn. I think I speak for most Braves fans. A good kid by all accounts. And I think when that trade was made, as we kind of hoped and suspected, as long as health cooperates, it was really a win-win trade for both sides. The Braves got the front-end starting pitcher that they wanted, and the Red Sox were able to move on and add a young position player who should be able to fit in pretty nicely to their lineup.
Yeah, total win-win there for everybody involved, hopefully. And there you have it. So big picture, the team's in great shape, 20-9 with a lineup, especially the top of it, that's not been its peak self. You don't want to get greedy necessarily, but there's a lot that could go better for the Braves. On the flip side, we have to be responsible and say that, I think that there are some regression candidates still on the team so far, but I would say more, if anything, more progression candidates, especially when you talk about the big guns at the top of the lineup. The pitching seems somewhat sustainable. Knock on wood again. And even though the guys who have already kind of cooled off in the middle bottom of the lineup have already kind of done that, and they're still winning. So I think full steam ahead for the Braves at this point in time. We do have one non-on-field topic to discuss, Scott, and it's not really in your wheelhouse necessarily. How do you feel about Bally Sports right now? Because it's not really like your day-to-day experience as someone who lives in Arizona.
I saw the news that the Braves are no longer on Comcast on Bally, and that is not fun. I can speak firsthand. The Arizona Diamondbacks last season, they're of course my local team here. They were pulled from Bally. Bally, Arizona collapsed, and it was not fun. I know a lot of fans here who were just distraught, and there was a lot of unknown for a little while. Yeah, anytime that TV contracts get in the way of watching baseball or any sport for that matter, it is the customer suffers, and it really is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think this is probably the loudest, most prominent carriage dispute in baseball that I can recall. Like even today and the last couple of days, like monitoring national people who have weighed in on this, and essentially like you got to get this stuff fixed because it becomes it's an issue where if your fans can't watch the games, and it's not an isolated thing. Xfinity is. I'll speak for the Atlanta market. A lot of people, including me, have Comcast almost exclusively because they carry Bally and they can have all of the stuff that they want in one place. Sports fans in particular, I cover many sports if you don't know my work elsewhere, but I do lots of other things and cover sports and write about sports. And I have to have lots of channels. And the only service that is available to me in Atlanta, and I'm not kidding, the only one that has every channel I need is Xfinity, except for that ended on May 1st. And now I don't really know what to do. That's a personal thing, but it's not a local issue either. This is a national thing where Bally has gone dark with all of their teams. And they still, I believe they have something like 12, 13, 14 baseball teams, similar level in the NBA. Those are the two most prominent sports, but NHL teams are still on Bally as well. This is not a baseball only issue, but right now it's baseball season, so it's going to be right in the mix of things. And look, I did some digging on this today. I already had the suspicion on it, but I asked around people that would know. I believe, from what I can gather, the Braves are literally the most valuable and prominent team that Bally Sports has in the country. We all know this. If you're Braves fans, I'm sure you have some recollection of this, but dating back to the TBS days and all that, the Braves are a national team. The Braves have a massive fan base. They are the team of the Southeast. They cover, several sports where they're the number one team in the Southeast. None of this is new, but that makes them the most I don't know about profitable, but certainly the most desired property that Bally has. So they're going to be hearing. I know they have been hearing from Braves fans constantly since this happened. Will it fix anything? I have no idea. But ultimately, short term, hopefully they find a fix. In season, the pressure is going to be on all parties to get something done, including the Braves. The Braves were tweeting out and sharing on social media officials. I'm not sure if you saw that, Scott. Like the Braves are weighing in directly, which that means they know the heat is on. If the official team is saying things about the TV contracts and all this stuff publicly, that means they know the fans are not happy and they don't like
No,
that.
no, no. And I mean, as I said a little while ago, the only person who really loses out here is the fan,
Certainly,
is the customer. And that's really unfortunate. I know with blackouts too being such an issue, not just for Braves, of course, but across all of Major League Baseball, it really is unfortunate that in the year 2024, with all the unbelievable technology and everything at our disposal, there are these ongoing TV disputes over sports, blackouts. You go on. I mean, you and I could probably rant about this for hours and hours, and still not get it all out of our systems
we
because it's
won't.
very frustrating. But let's hope, for the sake of everybody involved, that they figure this thing out sooner rather than later. Because I want to watch the Braves. I think I would imagine all of our listeners do too. The team is very good. It's a lot of fun to watch, and let's hope they figure this thing out because it's just nonsense and bickering over money.
There are some options if you are local to watch only the Braves. I know Fubo TV is an option as well as DirecTV Stream, but those are if you already have a service that you're paying for. Like if you're in a contract somewhere else with Xfinity, it's hard to do both. So we will not extensively cover the cable TV wars on this podcast, but because it literally happened on May 1st, and I would argue that was maybe the biggest story of the day, even on a day the Braves won a baseball game, because it just fan reaction and all of the way that because like you said, it's only the fan that loses here. And if fans can't watch your sport, that is a problem. All right. With that said, Scott, let us quickly preview the weekend. We referenced it several times, but the showdown in LA is happening. Their first meeting between the Braves and the Dodgers this season. And they only face off twice in the regular season this year. In fact, they will not play again until mid-September in Atlanta. That's a long time from now. That's 4.5 months between series. And that's a four-gamer in Atlanta. But if you are hankering for Braves Dodgers, you better get it now because otherwise you have to wait for quite some time.
Yeah, man, this is about as exciting as the baseball series gets in early May. I mean, storylines galore. We know of the history and the postseason with these two clubs. It'd be great to see Freddie Freeman, who's having another nice season. Of course, Shohei Ohtani mania with the Dodgers. That is just an absolute zoo with having such a talented player. Some great pitching matchups as well. I mean, two clearly on paper, for my money, the two best rosters in baseball right now. And it's a real measuring stick. Nobody wants to. You're not going to blow a game out of proportion in early May. Of course, there's a long season left, and for when you're in the position that the Braves and the Dodgers are in, seasons are ultimately, fair or not, going to be evaluated and judged based on how they perform in October and hopefully November. But there's no denying anytime these two teams get together, it's a national stage. All baseball fans turn their eyes to the series, and hopefully the Braves can build off on the win on Wednesday, and even 2 out of 3 in Los Angeles would be really great.
Yeah, and if you don't know our work necessarily, you may be surprised by this. If you do, you probably won't be surprised. If the Braves lose 2 out of 3 in LA, I'm not going to worry or panic. That's not what's going to happen, at least for me. But like you said, measuring stick. It's always better to win. And if you can, you don't want to get swept and all that stuff. I think I actually haven't looked. I usually would know the betting odds. I would imagine a lot of these games would be coin flip kind of games, even though they're in Los Angeles. There is one matchup on Saturday that is a little bit dicey for the Braves on paper. It's Bryce Elder, their fifth starter, against Tyler Glasnow, who's been really good so far this year for LA. So that's the one. If you would pick one on paper, that's the toughest. But on paper, it's baseball, and things are not ever guaranteed to happen. The Braves do miss also Yamamoto, who has not been incredible, but is a guy that I think is quite good, and they don't have to see him this weekend. And Atlanta's going to be sending Morton on Friday, Elder on Saturday, and Max Fried on Sunday. By the way, the first two games, going back to this, are prime Scott Coleman hours. I believe there's a 10-10 start and a 9-10 start the first two games for an afternoon getaway game on Sunday.
At least it's the weekend for our East Coast listeners. You can put on a pot of coffee or whatever you need to stay up late into the night. It's the Dodgers. It's worth staying up for. It's probably the two best teams in baseball. Should be a good series. Charlie Morton has been off to a really good start. He is going to face a very, very good Dodgers lineup, one that has unbelievable talent at the top of it. But Chuck's been really good. A big challenge for Bryce Elder. He is going to need his command, or he's just going to sink out there. Going up against Tyler Glasnow, who's been arguably the best pitcher in baseball this season. Very, very good, of course, with the Tampa Bay Rays before the trade. But then Max Fried gets the ball on Sunday. He has been phenomenal over his career pitching in Southern California. He is, of course, from the area. I'm sure he will have a lot of friends and family. But the last couple of seasons, anytime Fried has gotten the baseball against LA, he's been really good. It should be a great way to close out the series. He will go up against James Paxton, who's having a nice year as well. But I'm excited for it. It's a great series. The Braves will wrap up this West Coast road trip, which is good to get it out of the way early in the year when players are generally fresh. And hopefully the Braves can take the series, and it'd be a real nice statement early in the year if they can win 2 out of 3. And of course, the sweep would be a dream.
It certainly would be a dream. And we will leave it there for now on our debut of the Hammer Territory podcast. We will do another round here at the end of the show of plugs and not necessarily begging you, but certainly encouraging you to subscribe to this podcast. Anywhere you might find podcasts, just search Hammer Territory and Atlanta Braves podcast. If you've not found the show, there's also going to be direct links that we'll share on social media. You can follow our new Hammer Territory Twitter account at Hammer Territory. We'll also be on Instagram. We'll be on Facebook. You can find all of that stuff there. I am at BT Rowland on Twitter. Scott is at Scott Coleman 55 on Twitter. And we certainly would certainly love 5-star ratings as well. That helps us to grow. People might just be finding us and searching out new Braves content, and it would be very helpful for us as we start fresh and start from scratch on this podcast feed. Scott, what else can we say before we stop this podcast?
It's just really good to be back behind the microphone talking some baseball with you, Brad. We will have a ton of great content on this feed, multiple shows every single week with Brad and I, and then Stephen Tolbert and Shawn Coleman. A great team. Of course, if you are a longtime listener of Battery Power, you know us. Very similar style shows. A lot of great content coming your way, breakdowns, analysis. We're a little early in the year for emergency podcasts. I generally think this early in the year, if it's an emergency podcast, it's probably not a good thing.
Yes.
So let's hold off on the emergency pods for at least a couple more months until the trade deadline season kicks in. But nonetheless, really good to be back. We appreciate everybody's support on the old feed and, of course, this new feed. I will echo all of Brad. Please subscribe, leave 5-star reviews. It really does help us out with the algorithms. Tell a friend, tell a family member, and we'll be back soon. We're really glad to be back, and the Braves are good. It's easy and fun to talk about this team, especially when they're playing as well as they're playing this year.
Yes, the content train rolls along, so we hope you join us. We do appreciate everyone who was asking and looking out for the show and seeking out the show, and we're back, and we plan to be doing this for a long, long time. So please subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.